Hey guys, this is DFD, aka Dark Frozen Depths, back with another Kamihime project video. Now, first and foremost, at the time I'm doing this video, there's already another event going on. Personally, if you ask me, I think they're trying to rush events a little bit too much because this is one of the first times that we had two major events clash outside of pretty much guild competition and Tower of Malice, because those usually will conflict with events. But this is the first time we had two events where you literally had to grind that clashed with each other and they weren't some sort of crossover event. So this is definitely a new one, and honestly I think the devs do need to slow down on that one. But anyways, this is an event where you have to do it on your own, so if you're not strong enough, you should go and do the epic quest. You definitely want to hold on to any water weapons and whatnot you get from epic quests, because it will give you a decent boost towards being able to do this content. And for those that are strong enough in order to do this event, keep in mind that you may need to save up the materials from the Ragnarok fight as well as the other fights as well, because those green orbs are used for something later down the line, which will get you very, very powerful souls. And the other materials are used to final break limit one of the weapons that you want to aim for in this event. So that said, you are going to want to overgrind and stock up on some materials if need be. So keep that in mind. Also, due to the fact that this is an Advent event too, it shouldn't be too difficult, but given how Ragnarok may need a suggested power level of 30 and a decent amount of assault, some of the newer players probably aren't able to do this. The fastest way to do that, like I said, is epic quest, but if you are lucky, you should be able to get possibly some other weapons from other places as well. So who knows? There is another event going on right now, so use weapons from that in order to beef up your grid if you have to, but it's better to focus on one element if you can. So depending on what your element may or may not be, newer players might be able to handle all the content or not. Who knows? You do get two water-based epic quests to help you, so there's that. And there may be more after maintenance, I don't know. But anyways, starting off, Advent events, no grinding for materials to get into stages. You just spend your AP and go get the stuff. So there you go. Now, problem is, if you are capable of clearing Ragnarok, that's not too much of an issue. If you aren't, you only have one shot per day. So if you are going to use an elixir, that's the one time, but preferably you want to be able to clear it without elixirs. So keep that in mind. And the optimal place to grind is ultimate, but if you aren't able to do that, try to do expert as much as possible. If you aren't able to do expert, you're still not entirely out of the water. You can do standard and build yourself up to expert eventually, but preferably you want ultimate. If you're able to clear ultimate, you can do the bulk of the event, so there's that. Now, here's the thing with these weapons. The first one is definitely the priority weapon, because it starts off with a large assault, and then when you final break limit it, you'll be able to get a defender, a small defender. The large assault and the fact that the final break limits is a reason why you really want this weapon, especially if you're somebody that jumped in so late into the game, because there's already been quite a few weapons you may have missed, and given that this event repeats again later on, supposedly in a special way, you could possibly still get a lance setup for fire teams, so there's that. And then the other weapon happens to be a sword, a special sword, which is a glaive. This, I'd honestly say you could easily skip it, but if you're one of the ones that actually do decide to go out of your way for some weapons like Elaborate or Stinger, if you're going to use one, then this comes with both of those in one, so there's that. But preferably, I would skip it because Elaborate can come paired up with Assault and other type of stuff, and so can Stinger. And honestly, Stinger's only going to work if you go up against wind enemies. So there's that. Now, there could be argued that later down the line, we will have to try to focus on all 6 elements because, from what I found out, there's a bit of DMM content that comes with some sort of disadvantage if you go off element. That means not using the element of advantage, meaning something like, say, if I decide to fight a water boss with my light team, then they're going to have massively reduced damage output because I'm not using thunder. So there's that, which also makes weakness extremely weak. So that said, you will eventually have to build up all elements, so it could be argued that Stinger weapons may help down the line, but like I said, preferably you want Assault with Stinger, not Elaborate with Stinger. So this weapon's an easy skip, if you ask me. Now, they even suggest here that, to go on Epic Quest. Now, what it says right here, it says you need rank 40 to start these. I don't think that's the case. For Ragnarok, it should be true. But getting rank ups isn't that hard, especially if you grind it out on a Sunday quest. So there's that. And also it says here that we get EXP spears. That may not be the case because we're still waiting on the implementation of that. If it does get implemented, then fine. If it doesn't, then it's going to be weapon and add-on material drops. The difference between those is the fact that spears do not clog up your inventory at all, so they're arguably better, if you ask me. Because you need weapon and add-on slots in order to have the enhancement materials. Now, going into the stages, Expert, enemies aren't too dangerous or whatnot, and you do have to deal with a boss that has about almost 500,000 HP. But I'll go over the behavioral patterns and other fights because of the fact that it generally doesn't change. It just only changes the orb count and the HP, if anything. Ultimate's going to be like 3 stages to grind out for that one. And I will cover this a bit because of the fact that this is the one that everybody's going to grind. But generally, enemies will try to buff their own attack power while dealing damage. There's a chance they'll do that whenever you do normal hits. So if you're going to take these guys out, try to take them out in one shot. When you're strong enough, it's very easy to do such a thing. Now, as for the boss itself, this time it has 950,000 HP, and like Expert, it's got 4 orbs before it uses its strongest attacks, so keep that in mind. And then Ragnarok, it's at 3 million HP and 3 orbs, but generally between all the fights, what it has a chance of doing whenever you do normal attacks, it says eliminate all burning, so I don't know why it has something like that, but I think it's generally the status clear. So if I'm remembering correctly on this, it should remove yeah, it's removing debuffs from itself. So keep in mind that if you have stackable debuffs, they're almost useless because you're probably not going to stack them up to full power. Most of the stackable debuffs anyway are 5% or less, so you generally want to go something larger. Now, with the larger debuffs, you can't expect them to step in the entire fight. There's a good chance you could just eliminate them outright. So you're more or less supposed to be reliant on just buffs in your own strength instead of debuffs, but if you can get a few debuffs off, I would preferably do them before you do large attacks like bursts or a lot of ability nukes. So you got to keep in mind that she can remove debuffs off of herself, and it will remove all of them whenever she decides to just use this. Now, if she's at full orb, she won't use it, so it'll give you a few turns to actually do that. That might be the time to put your attack debuffs on her. But anyways, when she's at full orbs, she will put an attack up buff on herself. It says 30 seconds for some weird reason, and I never understood that with this fight, but it doesn't last very long, so even if you can't remove it, just wait for a minute. Because her attack buff will go off before your debuffs wear off, long before all that, so there's that. It's the Raging Nuke that's the problem, because that one's gonna hit everybody pretty hard. And that's the main gimmick of this fight. She's going to try to hit you hard, and you have little to no chances of removing her attack power. So, that's the thing. Now, when it comes to Ragnarok 2, they even suggest this add-on if you do happen to have her, called Jack Frost. She has a natural fire resistance, and she can be coupled even further with another add-on called Reki, who is from the Epic Quest, mind you. Summoning her will cause more fire resistance, so honestly, if you use a water team that has at least Reki, then you can have a little bit of protection towards this. Another method is to hopefully have the Water Kaiser, because she will give you even more resistance, provided you can summon her. In Ragnarok, may not be the case, because it really sucks getting a Frank Kaiser out the gate, because you're not really getting any boost from it. Even though it says healing increase, healing acts weirdly. But it's possible you may see a Jack Frost, it's possible you may see a Reki. Preferably you want the 100% add-ons, which would be Rudra and Leviathan, so you can deal as much damage output as possible. And also, the recommended souls for this actually happen to be Andromeda and Joan, because Joan will give you protection against the large damage from Typhon, and Andromeda can help you with healing and the defense buff, so there's that. Me personally, I would suggest those if you don't have somebody that can hit pretty hard, like, say, Herc or Shingen, so there's that. Mordred will probably not be useful in this fight, because even though she can lay a lot of debuffs and help your chances of doing that, she will probably have them removed. So, there's that. Others that may have some issues, I don't know she removes Snatch Stack, so it's more or less seeing if you gotta test it with D'Artagnan, but I'm not fully sure on that one. And if need be, Arthur may actually have some use because of the attack buffing and the fact that she can instantly fill her burst gauge. As far as it goes to Siegfried, it's only to get her out of raging a lot faster, but Siegfried's very, very situational. So preferably, you would probably want, if you're going the offensive route, Herc or Shingen. If you don't have them, maybe Arthur. If you're going a defensive route, definitely Andromeda and Joan. Don't try to use Mordred. But preferably when it comes to these type of events, if you want to speed up the grind, you're using D'Artagnan anyways, and there's a chance Snatch might get removed. I don't know. So there's that. Now, about the rewards themselves, Typhon isn't too bad to have for one specific reason. Two, actually, but I'll get into that. Again, you want the Lance. The Glaive, skippable unless you're really trying to get a Glaive grid. I don't know why, but there's that. You can get soul points if you happen to need them, so keep that in mind. There's these little orb things you're seeing right here. That's what I'm talking about. You only get them from Ragnarok. And while you can use them to trade for Dragonic Eye Shards right now, you're going to want to get the you're going to want to save them up for later, preferably. So keep that in mind. Now, here's what makes this interesting about the Typhon and Adon. Now, the one reason why you may or may not want to keep her as a sub is because summoning her will give an attack buff on everybody. for a few turns. I don't know if it's 1 or 2. I'll have to double check on that one in a second. The main reason why you may want to save her is because of the burst streak thing. Because set as a main, she increases the final damage hit of when you use full burst. And even when it's not even a full burst, as long as it's 2 or more. But preferably when you're doing full burst, it's going to massively spike the damage by 30%. Well, the final hit by 30%. And that's the largest hit of everything. Generally, later on, when players become stronger, they may find themselves in a situation where even elemental attack will not really boost their damage output that much because they're hitting the soft caps in the game. Burst Streak is one of those ways around the soft caps. So you may want to hold on to this one. Of course, she'll come down the line later on, but that's one reason why you may want to hold on to her, because eventually the general strategy is to try and to leave elemental attack to your Eidolons and then try to get pretty much all your assault and maybe even vigor from your weapon grid. But burst streak will come into play later down the line should you get strong enough to not need the elemental attack. So there's that. But definitely the weapon, the spear weapon. Well, they call it a spear here, it's a lance for us on the English version. Definitely get that one. Definitely max it out. Now, I gotta double check and see what it costs in order to upgrade it to Final Break, because that's a very important thing. Now, when it comes to advents, they have event missions and whatnot. It's the same typical stuff for a lot of these. Clear without an elixir, clear with certain rarities. Ultimate must be done with R rarity. If you do that, you're automatically clearing the SR1, so just go in with R Kamihime if you can. Ultimate also needs to be done with a certain element, which is light, this time around. That said, me being a light main, this is going to be a very trivial thing. But other people may depend on how strong they are. Light generally has a lot of healers. So, provided that, like, even in R rarity, there's maybe a couple if you happen to have them. But provided you have certain characters, ultimate on R can actually be fairly easy. So keep that in mind. It's still based on how strong you get your characters and whatnot. And fortunately, but at the same time a little bit unfortunately, we've had Guardian Eidolons for a long time. And if you were lucky enough to build up enough materials to trade for some of the weapons and whatnot, that can cover a lot of your bases for light. If not, then hopefully you do have a strong enough light team in order to take care of this fight. But in order to even get stuff from the Guardians too at a very low level, you pretty much have to quote-unquote leech off a raid, so that can even take a long time as well. So anybody that's actually had some time to build up for this type of stuff may have a few of those, who knows. But generally the stronger players will actually have those weapons. It's just something to look out for just in case. Now going back to this to double check. Yeah, Typhon is 3 turns on her buff, so that's something to remember. And going into the weapon itself, yeah, it doesn't seem to list what you need to final break it, but I do remember for a fact that you need a lot of these materials here. My suggestion to you is to save at least, generally at least 50 of the gold item, and then try to save at least 80 of the other stuff, just to be sure. You can double check it in game too, because when you get it to 3 stars, which you should quickly do in the middle of the event if possible, when you get it to 3 stars, which is considered max limit break, the final limit break becomes available, and then you'll be able to see the materials you need. The materials you need is Ori Chalcon. That's never changed. It's for every single final break weapon. What does change based on the weapon is the other materials, and you need materials from this event. So save up on these tradable materials in order to try to do anything about that. Now, looking at this list, I'm guessing it's going by when this event becomes something that will... Okay, it's not... I don't think it's necessarily permanent, but it repeats later down the line. So, that said, I'm guessing these are the materials you need in order to final break it, and only just these. So, that said, it will start restocking them later down the line. It's best to do it now than later because you can get more copies of the weapon a lot sooner and use them a lot sooner. So basically, I would try to save up whole materials, but if you do happen to miss out, don't worry, later down the line there's going to be another shot at them. But like I said, better now than later, because later is going to happen way farther down the line, so keep that in mind. And also, something I didn't mention too is the fact that the standard defense value is 10. And defense is something in the game where generally you can see yourself doing increased or reduced damage against enemies based on that value. It's usually at 10. Almost every enemy in the game has it at 10. There's only a few cases where it might be lower, where it's usually at 8. Sometimes you might even see it at 5. And there's cases where it could be higher, like say 12, 15. One enemy in the game is weirdly has 10,000. But that's something very special. I've covered a video about that already. But generally, don't worry too much about defense, especially since in most cases you'll probably be lowering it with debuffs anyways. Normal enemies, you don't want to really try to waste debuffs on them though, so save it for a boss. But anyways, that's all I can really say about this event. More of this will come soon, because I will probably do some runs and have them on video anyways. Although, don't expect it to really be quote-unquote showing a challenge, because even my water team, if I use them, has been built up to the point where they can handle this content pretty easily. So, that said, it's going to look like me blowing them completely away. But anyways, that said, more of this will definitely come soon. I will have videos of it. At this point, I have teams that can pretty much just go through the entire fights without even taking a turn, so it's not even going to be a contest. But definitely, I suggest you grind out this lance. That is the main priority, especially since the lance setup does lead to something very powerful from its phantom weapon. So that said, you generally are going to want this, especially since as a free player, it's a lot harder to build up a fire team. But they do give reasonable options, and this is one of them. But like I said, more of this will come soon, and take care.